I think it's time to talk some NBA. A special numbers game investigation reveals that the NBA season begins on Tuesday. Tuesday! Therefore, we bring in the best audio in the business, ladies and gentlemen, from hoop-ball.com and, of course, the Fantasy NBA Today podcast. Let's kick it off with Dan Besbris, everybody. Let's tip it off, to be exact. How you doing, Dano?
Yeah, I always get that wrong. I always kick it off or tip it off or first pitch for the wrong sport. Good morning, Gil. It's been too long.
Man, it has been. It's great to see your face. That means it's basketball season. We will talk, of course, Giants today, Giants-Dodgers. There's a football game tonight. I'm going to be a mess during this Giants-Dodgers game tonight. A mess.
Yeah, I've already picked off most of my fingernails from the previous 4 games, but I'm sure I can find one left.
Is that a Brooklyn Dodgers hat that you're wearing here? Is that what you're doing?
It is, yeah. I'd like to say that it's for the Dodgers, but it's for the fact that my hair is a complete disaster. So,
okay. All right. So now let's just establish this. At hoop-ball.com, you do capsules on season win totals for all 30 NBA teams. And last year, you did the same and you went 22-8. 22-8, which I don't know if you know this, Dan. Pretty good. But you yourself admit there's a caveat to that.
Yeah, so last year's numbers were a disaster. I feel like, and I don't know how they were set. I just know that they were set wrong. The bubble wasn't properly taken into account. Nobody knew what was going to happen with COVID. And it was just, they were way off the mark. And there was a whole bunch of player movement right before the season started where everybody was scrambling. And I thought the numbers were just about as weak as they'd ever been. Previous couple of years that I had done this, and obviously the one before got wiped out by a season that ended in March. So I guess it'd be 2019, the one that ended in 2019, 18, 19, and 17, 18. I know it's hard. They all run together. I think I went like 19 and 11 and 18 and 12 those 2 years. So pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, 22-8 was nuts. And I think this year the numbers are again a bit more accurate. So I'll probably be shooting for 18 and 12 or 19 and 11 again.
All right. Well, let's do as many of these as we can. Let's try to get like 8 if we can in here. We'll keep you for a couple segments. Let's begin with the Boston Celtics. And one of the big themes of what you're going to talk about is 72 games last year. Here's what the team did. Now it's 82, and you sort of use that as a barometer and move forward. You certainly do that with the Celtics.
Yeah, so last year they were a break-even 36 and 36 team, so extend that to 82. That should get you to 41, but we need to take into account that for Eastern Conference teams, well, either conference, I guess, the extra 10 games are within your own conference. They eliminated in-conference games last year when cutting it down to 72. Teams still had their 2 games with the opposing conference. So it was 30. They had 30 with the West. They had 42 with the East. This year, 30 with the West, 52 with the East. Celtics were also among the top teams in games missed due to COVID, and it just felt like everything, or COVID and protocols, I guess I should say, everything that could go wrong last year went wrong. I feel like this is a team that's just prime for a bounce back. They moved bodies around a little bit in the front office, but Brad Stevens is still there in a different capacity. I love Ime Udoka. He's a great new coach. I love that they brought in Al Horford because one of their biggest issues last year was position defense was way off the mark. But again, a lot of it comes down to how does the public feel a team was, and that carries over. And I felt like Boston, everybody felt like they were just the worst last year. And a lot of it was just sort of unfortunate breaks that I don't think happened this year, although, you know, Dan says that while Al Horford is in quarantine already, but still, I think the season should be a little bit more fortunate for them. I like the Celtics with the over.
Celtics over 45.5. We'll quote all the BetMGM numbers. 45.5 on the Celtics. Couldn't agree with you more about the Horford re-signing. All right, the Bulls are set at 42.5. A lot of your Bulls handicap has to do with what you anticipate being a slow gelling start. Explain.
Yeah, so I generally fade teams that pick up big pieces in the offseason. I like to back teams in win totals that have consistency. That's one of the things that I think maybe gets underrepresented in a number because the number is built on name power for the most part. And then, you know, what people saw happen the previous year. I actually like what the Bulls did this offseason. I think Lonzo Ball is a guy who fits in most anywhere. DeMar DeRozan, actually, at this stage of his career, probably a guy who fits in most anywhere also, but it doesn't happen overnight. Zach LaVine, Niko Vucevic, they didn't even really get a chance to play together last year, but for a couple weeks before LaVine missed, I think, 3 weeks with COVID. So there's a ton of gelling that needs to do. They unloaded all of their depth, so they're going to have to figure that out. I like that they brought in Alex Caruso also. These are all good moves in the long term. But if you get off to a slow start and you need to get to 43 wins on the year, you're going to have to really go gangbusters in the second half. I think they get close, but I don't think they get there. I'm going to fade the Bulls and their new star Powell all coming together, and I'll go under with Chicago.
All right, so Celtics over 45.5, Bulls under 42.5. I'll cherry pick these. Let's go to the Western Conference. We'll come back to some Eastern Conference teams, but I want to get to as many of these as we can. Dallas Mavericks. By the way, did you have the Mavericks minus 67.5 in preseason hoops last night? They beat the Charlotte Hornets by 68. Why do they even play these games? Ridiculous. A couple of those last night. But that was historic in that game. Mavericks, coaching change. That's the headline. Where do you land on them at 48.5?
Yeah, that's my biggest fear with Dallas. And actually, Gil, you and I, in one of our last segments last year, talked about the weird stuff going on in the Mavs front office.
Yeah.
So that is the thing that's sort of tugging at me to go back the other direction. But the math takes me over on this one. They're going to have Kristaps Porzingis healthy from the start of the year, which, as terrible as he looked in the postseason, he's been fine during the regular season in his career. Luka Doncic was unbelievable last year, but he's another guy who came into the season a bit out of shape, kind of had to play himself into whatever shape you call it, but like it took a few weeks. And I don't know if most people remember this, but half of the Mavericks were stranded in Denver for a month last year.
That's right.
Like a third of the team had COVID and never got out of Denver. That really hurt them. Their depth was tested. They were playing guys that were just exhausted and didn't belong in games for 30-plus minutes. Luka carried that team last year to 42 wins in 72 ball games. Again, if you just add a 5-5 to that, they're at basically 47. And if you add at the same clip they played last year, they're at 48. So all we need is for half the team not to get wiped out by COVID, and they should get one extra win this year. I like the over with Dallas.
Yeah, COVID has to be. I think anybody who's doing season wins, the effects of what COVID did to teams last year has to be part of the handicap projecting forward. So Mavericks for Dan Besbris. Dano going over on the Mavericks at 48.5. Now, I'm looking up at the board, the Western Conference win totals, and right below the Mavericks there is the Warriors at 48.5. So I would be remiss to skip over them. Clay is coming back, but he's not coming back at the outset. Where? Well, I know where you stand. I actually just peeked. At first glance, this offends me, but I get it, I guess. Where'd you go with this?
Yeah, sorry, Gil. I gotta go under on this one. Their number's 48.5, which before I even go into an explanation, doesn't that just sound really high for a team that's Steph and Draymond for probably half the season?
Yeah, because you can't assume that the young kids will just, flow into this that easily. And Clay's not going to be there at the outset. And even when he does get here, I think you point this out, even when he does arrive, like, can you assume, there's like peak Clay from the beginning? I get it. I do.
So last year they won 39 out of their 72 ball games. If we assume that carries over, that puts them at about 44 out of 82. And their number's 48.5. Not that Kelly Oubre was particularly helpful for them last year, but he is gone. So this is a team that's going to be relying even more heavily on Steph. And he was already taking some 23-ish shots the second half of last year. It's tough, man. I mean, I look at the Western Conference and teams, the Clippers are not going to be as good. You could make a case that Memphis may have gotten a tiny bit worse, although it probably comes out in the wash with young guys getting better. Everybody's trying to get better in the West. Minnesota's better. I don't know where you find the extra handful of games. And this is a weird one, too, because when I looked at the Warriors, I was like, what am I missing with this 48.5? Where are these extra 5 wins coming from? It wasn't a team that was particularly hurt by COVID, if you want to look at that part of the handicap again.
True.
Their guys were largely healthy last year, aside from James Wiseman, who I don't think is a particularly large difference maker either. So this is one where yeah, maybe I'm going to get tricked by something, but I have no idea how you get to 49 wins with that team. That's a big number. You're talking 49 and 33, 16 games over 500 for a team that was pretty middling last season. I just don't see where the big jump forward comes from.
All right, so Celtics over 45.5, reviewing the ones that we've already done. Chicago Bulls under 42.5. The Mavericks over 48.5. And you just heard it, the Dubs under 48.5, even with the return of Clay. So that's 4. Let's do 4 more at least on the other side. Season win totals with Dan Besbris, who went 22-8 last year. He can caveat it all he wants. He still went 22-8. Coming back, Numbers Game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Let's talk some more NBA season win totals. Dan Besbris here from hoop-ball.com, where he gives capsules to all 30 NBA season win total thoughts and bets on the year. Went 22-8 last year. We're going to go through at least 8 of these. Let's go 4 more. Let us continue with the Miami Heat. I won't give an intro. Never a bad thing going over on the Heat, and I think that's what you did here with the Heat, who are lined at, what did the Heat end up with, 48.5? What are they?
Yeah, 48.5.
Yeah.
I don't mean, by the way, I don't mean to take us off the rails, Gil, but I heard you
Please.
mention the Megapod, and I was thinking back to whatever it was 12 years ago when we did our joint podcasts and called it a Megapod.
The
You remember
Megapod.
that?
Dan Besbris, one of the few human beings on earth who actually had a podcast before I did called TW. What was it? What was it called?
Today in sports
betting. When I had the betting dork. Today in sports betting. TSIB. That's right.
We brought them together. It was like Captain Planet when we brought them together.
We were putting wires together. What is this podcasting thing we're doing? Now everybody on earth has a podcast so many years later. Dan Besbris, pioneer of the podcast we're talking to. Best audio in the business. By the way, sitting behind a nerdy draft board of players.
You like that?
That's awesome. Look at that. It's for your fantasy drafts? Really?
I want people to understand my existence as best I can convince them to. This is really just to make sure you guys don't see my bedroom on the other side. But yeah, this is a fantasy draft board. The era of Zoom calls. Miami Heat. I like the over with Miami, and a lot of it is again the COVID anti-handicap, basically, where last season they lost a ton of games to COVID protocols. There was a stretch in the middle of the year that is really easy to forget, but it was kind of like the 2 main pieces for some of it, and then Kelly Olynyk, and that was it. It was like 3 guys, and they were like, you know what, we might as well just play 3 versus 5, and then everyone was playing like 42 minutes a ball game for 3 weeks. They were exhausted. At one point, they just rested everyone because they couldn't put any more miles on their legs, and they were losing. You take out a stretch like that from their season, and everything changes. I mean, I was floored that they got to 40 wins last year. They had no business there after the bubble run. All those teams that went deep into the bubble got crushed with injuries. I was, and I always am, very impressed with what Miami's able to do. And they brought in reinforcements this offseason. But even if they didn't do that, I don't really care, because you start a season now with mostly a rested offseason. I know it was a month shorter than usual, but they were knocked out of the playoffs relatively early. Give Jimmy Butler a chance to get right. Give Bam Adebayo, like, even Bam missed 8 games last year. That's how tough it was to make it through last season. And that dude never misses a ball game. Kyle Lowry, great veteran presence. I know he's on the wrong side of his prime, but he's better than what they had at point guard before. I just like Miami to sort of come out with a purpose this year. Almost the same handicap I had for the Boston Celtics, really. Just switch it to a different team name. I'm going over 48.5.
All right. This might be the favorite of the ones I want to talk to you about. Phoenix Suns. They got all the way to the NBA Finals, famously losing to the Milwaukee Bucks, but no team had better fortune than they did with injuries and specifically with COVID. We start there, I suppose, with your Suns handicap.
Yeah, nobody's going to be as healthy as Phoenix was last year. That was completely nuts. Chris Paul missing 2 games. I think Devin Booker missed 3? DeAndre Ayton missed 3. Mikal Bridges missed 0. I might be getting the Booker number wrong, but generally, their core missed under 10 games altogether. And for most teams, their main guy generally missed 10 games or more by himself. I don't see that carrying over year. I think there's going to be a bit of a finals hangover for this team that, one, again, short off season in general for everybody, but even shorter if you played into the middle of July for your finals run. And then there's that mental element of when you get all the way to the end, 2 wins away from a championship, the regular season just doesn't feel as important the next year. And Phoenix took the regular season extremely seriously this last season. They wanted to prove something. They wanted the higher seed in the playoffs. This is look, we showed everybody we can get there last season. Now we just have to make sure we are right when we get there. We were generally healthy last year. We need to be healthy again. You're going to see Phoenix dial it back on the throttle in the regular season this year, and getting over 51 wins. I think they're 51.5 right now. That's a huge number when you're not taking the regular season quite as seriously. Now, again, if everything breaks your way, they get there. I mean, we see that with Utah sometimes, but that's just a gigantic number that I can't see them getting to.
Gigantic. Only the Jazz and Lakers higher at 52.5 in the West. The Suns at 51.5. And then you also pointed out, I think astutely, like the whole Chris Paul thing, like every Chris Paul thing went their way. Can you really assume that now in his second year with the Suns, again, not getting any younger, let's be kind, that he can be as good as he was? I'm just not sure I buy that either. Suns under 51.5. Let's go to the Blazers. The Blazers end up with all the same players, right? Dame didn't go anywhere. McCollum is there. They're getting Jurkic back. I mean, this is a full throttle Blazers team. Norman Powell resigns, and they're at 44.5.
Yeah, this is the consistency wager, pretty much. I was worried when I did this write-up a few weeks ago that McCollum might be gone by the time that people were looking at the write-up, but the Ben Simmons stuff in Philadelphia, it seems like they're trying to reconcile. I don't see how they actually all play together for an entire season, so I guess that's still on the table. But as long as they've got the same core, this is a team that can get out to a better start. And getting to those overs, you just can't sort of clunk your way out of the starting gates or you're in real trouble. I like that Norman Powell re-signed. He wasn't fully comfortable with them last year. You could see his field goal percent dipped a little bit. I also like that they brought in Larry Nance Jr. I think that adds a different element to a front court that for years has had no defense. Nurkic doesn't. I know he gets steals and blocks, and as a fantasy guy, I have to be cognizant of that. But from a traditional defensive outlook, he's not that great on that end of the floor. Last year, Enes Kanter was his backup, who did a great job while Nurk was out, but also not good defensively. So Larry Nance in there for defense. They brought in Cody Zeller. So all these big men that are constantly hurt, they can kind of pick up and carry for one another. Rob Covington's still there. And it feels like, and certainly the narrative that's being put out is that this is sort of like Dame's last run potentially with the Blazers. If this doesn't go well, then things get real ugly real fast. I've bet against Dame before from a leadership standpoint, and he always gets his teams ready, and they always impress me. They got to 42 last year. Just don't screw it up. Nothing terrible happens. They should be able to get to 45 this year.
44.5 over. Yeah, Nurkic had the family tragedy too. Okay, last one. We only have 60 seconds here. No team got the worst of it like the Toronto Raptors. Where do you stand on the Raptors?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the very easy answer to that question. I know Kyle Lowry's gone, but most of their team just wasn't there last season. They had, I think they were 2 in the NBA in COVID protocol stuff. That was another team where down the stretch, it looked like maybe they were tanking, but then they brought their starters back, and it turned out they were just resting everybody because they were too damn tired. They'd been playing too many minutes. Too many guys had been out. A lot of their young guys are going to get better this year. They were playing in Tampa. Give them a home court advantage again. I think the Raptors come back and impress some people this season. I also like that they brought in Precious Achiuwa in a trade. I think that's going to be nice for their front court. But mostly it's about OG and Anunoby taking a step forward again. Freddie VanVleet, he can lead this team just fine. They have like 4 options at center all of a sudden. Pascal Siakam being hurt, that's a negative on this number. Hopefully he's back in about a month, and we should be good to go.
Dano, great seeing you, man. Means basketball season's right around the corner, 5 days away. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
We are back, baby. Let's do some hoops. Thanks, Gil.
Let's do it. At Dan Besbris on Twitter, Besbris, or as we like to call him, Dan Beebe. Fantasy football. Todd Wright next. The Numbers Game at VEASAN, the Sports Betting Network.